Kia ora. So now, of course, the chatter around Delphi murders, the chatter and the laser beams, etc., it's all repositioning and focusing on Kathy Allen, the wife of Richard Matthew Ricky Allen. And the majority of people who make comments, at least, the majority of people who comment on YouTube are categorically convinced that Kathy Allen had to have known all along, and that's that, right? How could she not have known? How could she not have recognized her husband on the bridge, recognized his clothing on the bridge? This is the big one. And remember, of course, Doug Carter is always saying, just forget the head, because, we couldn't see his face very clearly, really. Forget the head, just look at the body, at the mannerisms, the clothing, etc., right? And we're discovering on Kathy Allen's social media that there are a lot of videos she's shot and uploaded into the public domain that show Richard Allen wearing what looks to be the blue jacket. Okay, and you have to ask, who was Kathy Allen married to? And, we need to explore, did she know? I think what a lot of people are forgetting, that, sure, spouses, partners of serial killers, of killers, hindsight is 2020. In hindsight, they see all the signs. So John Kelly and his team, Stalk team, they have made many videos talking about the type of person that the Delphi murderer might be. John Kelly has some profiling videos on this, and also as a team, Stalk talk in some videos, I think one was called Meeting Mr. Wrong, that they do talk about the type of person this offender is. And this is that he is sadistic, mainly. And, the crime was sadistic. It's sadistic to abduct these girls and make them walk, like making them walk the plank, like making them walk into fire or off a cliff, making them walk under duress or under ruse, probably ruse and duress, maybe a knife, maybe a gun or both, and to walk them hundreds of meters, it would seem. This is sadistic, this is cruel, and this is a man that is confident the crime is planned in detail, and he's a hunter who has hunted and corralled these girls. Otherwise, wow, he's just someone who I tend to think he has had the Monon High Bridge in his sights as a location probably for years, maybe ever since he moved to Delphi, or even before. He grew up in Mexico County and moved to Delphi in 2006. I think he's had that as a location, as something on his mind, something he fantasized about for probably years. But maybe he just got lucky there, right? Very, very lucky, and the girls got unlucky. But it seems either way he's had prior knowledge But has he also targeted these girls? And John Kelly and his team and other profilers tend to think, well, you know, if it's not fantastically random sort of thing, they tend to think, no, this had to be something very targeted. And we are learning that Keegan Klein's charges have been changed up. So 5 of his 30-odd CSAM charges are dropped completely. 12 have been downgraded from felony 5 to felony 4. And, you know, does this tie in with any sort of truth about a red Jeep? Or at least this connection with the Anthony Shots account, Keegan, Anthony Shots, and Richard Allen. Did Richard Allen become aware of Liberty or Abby? Possibly Libby, because of her involvement with Anthony Shots' account. Was he aware of her from there and stalking her from there? Okay, and did he somehow know she might be at the bridge, or was again it just this confluence of things, this dumb luck for this predator, right? But you know, it seems that the bigger picture here, it's not because there's this, well, you know, there could be other townsfolk clearly involved in the CSAM operation, ring, whatever it's called, network. But I think this is the big picture, right? It's not that, you know, thousands of the German family members are involved, right? It brings me to mind, though, something. You know, how long do you think Richard Allen was on the radar? And did they need an alibi broken? And were hoping to spur that on, hoping to trigger something with the 2019 presser, where they released a young man's sketch. It kind of looked like Richard Allen when he was in his college days, because there's a photo of him from when he was young. It kind of looks like him, the face shape and everything. And he's got this long chin and yeah. But remember when the Sergeant Jeremy Pierce, I think his name is, remember when that announcement was made late at night because, you know, some leak was about to happen, right? And so they brought out the information on Anthony Shots, this announcement. If you've had any contact with Anthony Shots' catfishing account, you know, get in touch. Do you think that Anthony, this sergeant, has aged more than 10 months? To me, it looks like he's aged more than 10 months. So I'm not thinking because he's been under a lot of pressure. I'm thinking because that was filmed when? Maybe in 2019 and it wasn't released. I mean, we need to question. I mean, okay, sure, this is all strategic, right? Oh, it's like these brilliant law enforcement minds. Is it strategic? Is it stupid? Have they really done the right thing in the way that they have brought out information? Sure, okay, we've got to look at the big picture and imagine all these other victims that maybe they're trying to save. Well, I'm sorry, but if they're not releasing information that might show people what's really going on, how are they saving other people? More and more victims are just piling up. You know, I want to move on with this. So there's talk about, oh, you know, Richard Allen, he's an early witness. And some people, I think, are under the misapprehension that Richard Allen turned himself in as the bridge guy. Well, look, if he thinks his phone is going to have pinged in the general vicinity and he's come forward as a witness to say this, that's one thing. We know how unreliable the pings are. We don't need Mr. Steve going around with Mrs. Steve in Delphi at the very time the search and the arrest is going down, mind you. Did they pick up on that? No. I mean, sorry, I can't respect a man, the muffled mumbler who is consistently showing up on Sunny Justice's channel. That's all. But we know the pings, they're not pinpointing. It's not like a satellite location. It's just towers, not enough of them. It could be within a huge radius. So coming forward to say, yeah, I was around the area, he's not saying he was Bridge Guy, okay? He's not saying he was Bridge Guy. He hasn't ID'd himself as on the bridge. So when Carter's saying perhaps we've interviewed you or someone close to you, yeah, well, that's probably true. But he's not saying we have interviewed you, although actually they had. And why did they miss him? Well, hopefully this will come to light. When did they get back onto him? Hopefully this will come to light. We don't know, so we can only speculate, and we could be in completely the wrong ballpark, so to speak, right? I think the answer to did Kelly Ellen know, it's probably, well, no, but with a not really, right? Sorry, I've just got all these little scrappy notes here, things I was thinking of. Do you remember Shane Great? He's a serial killer. He's a reasonably young person, and I'll see if I can remember to link it, this Dr. Phil interview, but it was actually a very good interview, and actually Dr. Phil appears to have helped this woman immensely. Her name's Amber. She met Shane Great in her church group and very quickly became deeply involved with him, fell deeply in love with him. Shane Great love bombed a woman who, suddenly felt confident, suddenly felt desirable, okay? And she gave up of herself very quickly, quicker than she'd had in the past. She felt differently to how she'd ever felt in the past, and she got pregnant and they married, and it was all within a few months. And it was, even before her baby was born, the situation had changed with how Shane acted, right? But when she first met him, look, he was shy. She had to be the outgoing one, introduced herself to him at church. Often his behaviours were to show a withdrawn personality. He'd come home and he'd just go and disappear into his shed and do whatever hobbies, etc. He wasn't interested in family time and raising his own daughter and that sort of thing, although she became this tool later on, right? And all along through this crumbling marriage, with all these signs, poor Amber, who seems like a very lovely woman, she wanted it to work. She wanted to make it work, even with a man who had throttled her, pressed her down into the bed, and his eyes, you hear, eyes went dark, his eyes went black. It's like something else comes over, someone else is inside this person, right? And even after that, she wanted it to work. Even when she left him and wanted to divorce him, and he was stalking her and leaving messages on the answer phone, she somehow wanted to make it work. He had isolated her from family and friends, right? And she had even been told by him that he had killed someone. And he said that it was some guy and that it was self-defense, etc. And then eventually extrapolated or whatever on that to say, oh, it was with a knife. And she thinks maybe he was actually confessing to murdering the Jane Doe who had been murdered 6 years before. So she thinks she's married someone and she just wanted the guy back that she married, except he was already a murderer there, a murderer hiding in plain sight, perhaps just hiding in the church because he's trying to, it's a survival mechanism of his, and he's trying to find somewhere or something, you know. Anyway, Gary Ridgway's wife, Judith, had been married before, maybe even a couple of times, and the husband before she married Gary had come out to her as bisexual, and she just was not down with the lifestyle that he wanted her to live alongside him. And she'd come out of that feeling rather, you know, just depleted and drained and down and, you know, confused and just not having much hope. And then she met Gary Ridgway in a bar. They were dancing to country and western. She just thought it was fantastic. She was very taken with him. And at the end of that night, you know, he's leant down and given her the first kiss. And, you know, he was her best friend, her lover. She describes him as her everything. And eventually he wants her to move into his house, and the house needs a woman's touch, definitely. And she's laughing about how much furniture she's got to, you know, to try and fit it into this house, and she can't believe the state of his house, really. I mean, there's a carpet missing from his bedroom. So, you know, this is presumed to be a carpet that Gary Ridgway has maybe murdered someone on, at least rolled them up in and disposed of them in. He had scores of victims. So it's, you know, the situation where throughout the 80s, you know, all these bodies were being discovered, and Gary Ridgway is the person that is the Green River Killer. And that's what the Green River Killer, you know, it's the Green River area. That's what they were dubbed. Anyway, so by the time Judith, she asked Gary to marry, and they married, and he'd had 5 years of terror before that. She thought he was the perfect boyfriend and didn't know he was hiding the dark secret, it says in these documentaries, you know. But in 1987, detectives knock on the door, right? Now, Gary Ridgway, he passes a polygraph, and he's shrugging this off, says Judith. They wouldn't have let me go if they knew I did it or if they thought I do it. We need to just get on with our life. Okay, so this was after knowing him for 2 years, and a year later she married him. But, you know, cops were building a case. He was actually always sort of, I guess, what could you say, like a secret suspect or something? I don't know. But what a shame, because he went on to murder his killing spree was like a couple of decades long. And Judith was saying, look, she was hoping he wasn't guilty, because she was losing everything. She clung on to everything that Gary said, all those reassurances. And, you know, he'd get up early in the morning and go into work 2 hours early to work overtime, right? To work overtime. But I thought this is when he was committing his murders. And in fact, one of the things that did bring him down was, I think, paint samples that were found on some of the victims. One of the victims, they were an exact match for products used in his work. I think he worked in the motor industry. I don't know if was it as a mechanic or working on car bodies or something like that. But she just thought he was a really good guy, and they had a close relationship and friendship. And, you know, she said things took on a different light, and she can't believe that after 2 years of, you know, pre-trial or whatever, and and him declaring his innocence. It was right up until that point in court when he says, he's pleading guilty. Yeah, crazy. So, he was lying about the overtime. This is when he was off committing his killings mostly. He lied about a scar on his arm. One of his victims had scratched him with her nails down the forearm. He poured battery acid on it to hide it. I mean, he really was aware of everything he was doing, of how that could look. He poured battery acid on it. Judith had such sympathy about his injury. She knew what pain it caused him. Now, he killed prostitutes. Like a lot of, Arthur Shawcross did this as well. And maybe, because these killers expect that no one's going to care so much, or maybe it's because no one's going to notice them missing or report them missing so quickly. It gives them a buffer. But maybe the ones that he killed, they were the ones that would insult him or tell him to hurry up, and that would enrage Gary. But his kill rate went down while he was with Judith. And he says he really was happy with Judith. He used to write to Judith a lot. It was the happiest time of his life. He used to write to Judith a lot, but she finally stopped writing back in 2003, and she divorced him. And she just wants to get all the poison out of her and get on with her life. And, she says it has been very traumatic. Now, this is the wife of the Green River killer, right? Who could have possibly even have killed 100 people. But I think he was convicted of 43, 48, something like that. And of course, she can look back in hindsight now. I mean, I know I can't get this blue jacket out of my mind either, but, the doubt and the denial, it would be very strong in someone, and particularly if their partner is their world, right? This is where I wanted to look at this option, this possibility of maybe some sort of codependency, because the whole role, it's designed around making the other person's life work while you slowly die inside. Your whole meaning of your life is to support that other person, solve their problems. And yeah, so codependency, can it describe this blindness and desire, denial? Is this just one possible explanation for Kathy? So the partner is someone, with extreme personality traits, maybe a personality disorder or mental disorder. And the codependent is the caregiver. Codependency isn't a diagnosis or a disorder in itself, okay? It's not, it might be related, I think, to dependency disorder, but codependence in itself it's a way of being, right? It's enabling. It protects the individual. It helps them avoid answering for things, etc. It's an unhealthy dependence. The codependent's going to have difficulty trusting, a need for their own control, even though the other person is probably in control. They're going to have issues with boundaries. They're going to be frustrated. And a lot of the actions and the thing that they're stuck in, the cycle they're stuck in, is going to cause anxiety, depression. They're not going to be truly assertive, so they're going to be angry, but they need approval, and they're scared of abandonment, and they're trapped, right? And being trapped is just heightening a lot of the negative feelings like the anxiety and depression. And I wonder if throughout the years just before and after the murders of Abby and Libby, which is the alleged crime that Richard Allen is accused of and is charged with, I wonder if she's menopausal, right? There's a post on her Facebook where every day you'd be like, and there's happy face, crying, anger, sadness, all of these different emotions, just little emotive emotis. What do we call those again? Oh my God, And so, the sense of self-identity and purpose, it just becomes all about and taking care of the other person. Perhaps the other person has substance abuse issues. Definitely both Richard and Kathy appear to be drinkers. They share a lot of hobbies. The pool tournaments, going hiking, trekking, those two slightly different things, horse riding, these holidays around and about, right? But, is this because there's that you do it with me or not at all, right? This, even though they appear to have family groups and people around, we don't know how isolated she really was emotionally and everything. So there's that song, if you leave me, can I come too? Which would be, really, that would be the tagline for every codependent, right? Needing love, needing to belong, and just wanting to avoid all this loneliness and hurting. And where does codependency really arise from? And some people who study this and know this deeply, they think it comes from complex trauma, right? So this might be abandonment in childhood or abuse in childhood, and actually the church and some values and some situations in churches can worsen or reinforce all of this negativity, right? But the big factor here to do with the sense of identity and creating a codependent person is shame. Okay, so how does someone with this deep shame survive? Solve problems, meet other people's needs, or the partner's needs, enable their behavior so that they, that person, they never grow up. Totally lose track of your own needs. You're dying inside and things just get worse, and so you both get sicker. This couple have had 30 years together. 30 years of, this is just all a hypothetical, clearly, okay, clearly. I know nothing. I don't know these people. All I know is that Richard Allen is to have been, he's alleged to have killed Abby and Libby, or to be involved in their murders, because I think in Indiana, as I've said before, a murder could mean first degree, second degree, whatever. So we're not sure what the situation is, and there's probably more murder charges coming down the line. I mean, I fail to see, though, how someone who is an accomplice in murder can cut a deal and not be held responsible for their part. Keegan Kline. So, what if this person, this is an addiction, right? So they have this addiction to healing their shame, thinking they're healing their shame through external sources, external actions, not just healing it within themselves, right? So they're in a living hell, but they can't let go. It's toxic, but they can't stop. There's no honesty. There's no trust. There's no respect. Okay? And it revolves around a narcissist. and the narcissist is in power, and the narcissist maybe of their childhood was neglecting and abandoning them, and they're now desperately trying to have this not happen, right? And maybe this can get someone caught up in just going through these motions of life and pushing uncomfortable thoughts and feelings aside. So feeling bad for needing that attention, not liking self, not having positive feelings about self, feeling unlovable. How to fix this is to try to keep pushing that other person to have the positive feelings about themselves, about them, right? So the relationship is where the value comes in. The relationship is where the value as a person comes in. They have to be in a relationship. So if you can't be alone because then you have no value, then you are going to stay, people stay, way too long in some relationships, don't they? They know how bad it is, but they stay. They think it's worse on the other side. They feel like they'll cease to exist, maybe, right? So a lot of their identification is in being married, being a partner, and they want to be the best partner. But I think it's a mistake too for people. I've seen this a lot throughout the years. You see these couples, it seems like she's really wearing the pants. She's not. What might be thought of as a nag or a fishwife or someone with this overt personality, and sometimes Kathy seems to display this in her videos, right? And she can seem quite raucous and crash, and she's actually, if you just look at photos and everything, she looks lovely, bright, happy, outgoing. But then you hear her, the things that make her laugh, the things that she gets pleasure out of, the way she speaks, the jokes, the types of things she does, what sort of gets a reaction or a cackle out of her, it's got an edge, right? I don't like it. So they can't be alone because that's meaning they're unlovable, right? And so their value is in being the helper, or to be someone who is very needy that needs rescuing, right? Or they can be both. And they must be happy. So maybe this is why that part of her personality has an edge, right? Because it's that nasty upbeatness. This is the type of person I've never liked, a sort of person that gets pleasure from, playing tricks and it's just a joke. These people creep me out. I'm repulsed by it. I've never liked it. I don't like people's minds, the ability that people have. That's what they're putting their way to is pulling the rug out from people, making people lose balance, unbalancing people, that push-pull, that making them uncomfortable. I fucking hate it. I don't think it's smart or bright or clever. But they're the codependent person, that they're not showing their true self. So they're not going to be vulnerable. How would you not be vulnerable? Be on the offense, maybe, right? Otherwise they're not going to get love, right? That's what they feel like. Their happiness depends on the narc's happiness. So they have to calm their anger. They have to solve the issues of the narc. And they become on high alert. They've got that radar, right? So, how your spidey senses, you're ultra tuned in to the person's every move. How they walk will tell you everything you need to know about what sort of situation you're about to encounter with them when they come in the door. You can tell by the way they put down their keys or take off their shoes, right? the emotional roadmap, you know, yeah, they can really read their minds. And, you know, the daughter, I think her name's Brittany, would have really been trained to cooperate. It's interesting, isn't it? You know, when did she meet her future husband, whom she married in 2018? Was it before February 2017? Was Richard losing a daughter, someone in his control, and he didn't like it? I mean, yes, I do. Look, there is a resemblance to Libby. I think there are differences too, but there's a superficial resemblance, maybe more in body type, not in face. But is there something sick going on there? I don't know. Kathy Allen had on her Facebook, you know, the tagline, live and love as if every day is your last. You know, and her Facebook's full of pets and children, nieces. I found it interesting. Fundraiser, 1st of the 9th, 2019. Sandy Hook Promise. There's a post there for the Sandy Hook Promise. Thought that was interesting. But, you know, likes and just, you know, her likes listed as hiking, fishing, football. I mean, sure, I like hiking and fishing and stuff, but, you know, it's very geared around what maybe Richard Allen's likes were, wasn't it? And, you know, but she also puts photography, playing pool, right? And she does put beauty or fashion or beauty, I think, or something like that. And yes, there are photos at JC's now closed bar, and I do believe that's where the photo is taken with the young Richard in the background. Well, you know, the young bridge guy sketch. Look, I think her world's come crashing down. I mean, sometimes, see, in her videos, sometimes it's really, it would be easy to misplace what's really going on there, right? Like when she's playing, saying to Richard, dance, and he's playing pool, and she goes, dance. And the song is, so Lynyrd Skynyrd. It's a song that people are going to bring up and say, see, she knew. She tells him to dance, and he sort of does a silly dance. He hops around on his left foot. You know, you can't help but think, is that a joke is that an in joke because how he sort of looks like he's hopping on the bridge, right? Did she know? There is a possibility, but there is also the possibility of hindsight, everything coming crashing down, her world crumbles. Yeah, it's a very confusing case in that regard. I'm very conflicted about it. I want to think that she didn't know, that of course everything makes sense to her now and she feels absolutely devastated and stupid and all of that, right? You know, not that I'm wishing her to feel that, but you know what I mean. But, you know, we can misinterpret so many things, right? We can misinterpret things 100 ways with our benefit, so to speak, of all the information that we have, which means that we can get it so wrong, right? Because we can see what a lot of YouTubers are doing with the benefit of all their information is they're taking these things that they find and applying their own interpretation to it, right? When there are, of course, other interpretations. You know, she's showing herself, you know, being gentle, like I noted, you know, she's gentle to bugs, and things like that. She was having a hard time at Christmas, December 2016. Her brother had died prior to that, and she's really grieving. And did Richard not like her grief, right? Because that's something about her, for her, right? I don't know. What are all these catalysts that have grown, you know, come into Richard to allow him, you know, what is it that's, if he hasn't done something so heinous in the past, what was a situation that spurred him on to be able to do this in February 2017? What changed so that he was no longer, being sort of enabled and protected? And it's hard to, I'm not saying this very well. What else have I written? Menopause, I think I've noted that already to you. And even though they seem very close and they did a lot together, right? And it seems like maybe they didn't have a lot of space apart, Richard is still capable of having had a secret life. You see what you want to see. The same way some see the negative things, right? My thing has been my deepest regret and grief in life, relationship-wise and everything, was, going through menopause and just being absolutely crazy and going through the mill, and it pulling in to the present a lot of past trauma, CPTSD coming back to the fore, and brief flashes of psychosis, and just all this just this terrible emotion, and not being able to love what was there, loving me, and being so cynical, and not realizing that I was being given the most anyone would ever give me, being loved better than anyone would ever love me,